So today we're going to spend some time talking about gender and particularly feminism. We're going to talk about a variety of types of feminism. If you know anything about feminism, you know that there are lots of different ways to think of feminism. And I'm just going to present you a possible set of feminist theories. We're going to try to talk through some things that I really think impact people in the church and impact women in particular in the church, and try to kind of see if there's a way we can apply feminist issues, feminist questions, feminist theory a little bit to how families develop and those sorts of things that we're talking about in the class. So let's get started with that. First of all, we know that there are male-female differences. Some of the time, the things that we consider to be such enormous male-female differences are really not so incredibly different, but are or they aren't differences that exist so much between men and women, but between personality types. On the other hand, there are things that seem to be pretty consistently different between the two genders, and we don't want to stereotype. We don't want to be chauvinistic or misogynistic in any way, of course, but maybe there are some things that are kind of clearly male and female that we need to kind of talk about. One of our old colleagues, Dr. Darnell, gave me this a long time ago, and it's just kind of a comical representation of maybe how men and women stereotypically tend to think in relationships. He also gave me these next two, which of course are just kind of a joke, but jokes like this are stereotypical because there's some element of truth in there. You can see the male brain here that has dangerous pursuits and a listening particle and a crotch scratching area and those types of things. And then if we look at the female brain diagram, has tiny little sex place and a sense of direction place, and then big commitment hemisphere and shopping area and all those types of things. And of course, that's just meant to be kind of silly and funny. But the truth is, as I said, we do kind of have some of those differences, and maybe we need to pay some attention to them and see how much difference they really make among men and women. Now, before we talk about some real specific problems, we'll talk a little bit about the idea of feminism itself. There are three traditional themes that show up in feminism, and this is not, this is not the ultimate truth about feminism. This is a thing that maybe is kind of true, and you could replace some of these with some other things, but this is just one possible way of kind of thinking about what feminism has always been. Number one, this is kind of silly to even say it, an emphasis on women, the perspectives of women, and the experiences of women. Excuse me. Often called the voice of women, giving women a voice, a political voice, a social voice, a spiritual voice, all kinds of different places where women have been oppressed and not heard. This is an opportunity for women to have kind of a voice. Number two, recognition that under existing social arrangements, women are subordinated or oppressed. Now, this is an interesting idea because some people don't really believe this. Some people think that since maybe the 50s and 60s, women have made so many strides that there's really no subordination or oppression of women in our culture anymore. I'm going to propose to you that there really still is. Has it gotten better since the feminist revolution in the 60s? Yeah. But is it gone? No. Women are still placed in subordinate positions. Women are still oppressed. Women are still treated differently than men in our culture. And as we'll talk about in a minute, the Christian church, particularly the conservative Christian church, is one of those places where that really still happens, and it's really still an issue. Third thing, feminism has traditionally had as a theme a commitment to trying to do something about number two, to end that subordination, to end that oppression, and a call for women and men to begin to take action to do something about it, to change the way things have been. So I want you to kind of think about that question and maybe kind of ask yourself, as a personal thing, maybe think, what has my church experience been? What has my institutional religion experience been? Has gender been a problem for me? Has gender been a problem for people that I've known? Has gender been a problem in my church? You may be one of those people like me that's been through the process where a church made the decision to have women as deacons, or struggled with the question of having women as having a woman as a preacher. You may have been through that. You may have heard of it for sure. But think for a minute about whether or not gender really has been a problem. And then maybe think about that second question: can you integrate Christianity and feminism? It's kind of interesting and sometimes a little bit humorous to me that in my undergraduate class, when I talk about this very often, people will kind of really balk at this question and say, well, no, because feminism is this bad, sinful thing. Certainly it's perceived as being something that's just left-wing and liberal and doesn't typically fit with conservative American Christianity. And very often I'll say to my classes, well, you know, a lot of you are feminists and you don't know it, and they just don't like that, because the idea of being feminist is like calling somebody, you know, in the 60s a communist. It just doesn't fly. So I want you to think about those two questions. Is gender a problem for Christians? Has it been a problem in your experience? Is it a problem in the bigger institution of Christianity? And can you then decide to integrate Christianity and feminism? Can we do a Christian feminism? And if so, maybe what would that look like? That would be something that we can talk about and think about. Now I want to introduce you really quickly to a scenario that, you know, is just an example of something for me. It's not, this is not the most important issue that's ever happened here. This is not, you know, something that I want us to just focus on entirely. But this little example that I'm going to give you, coming from one of our seminary professors, it was disturbing to me, and I think is kind of a disturbing thing. And I think it bears us spending a little bit of time on it. What I want to share with you here is this little story, a little news story of Bruce Ware, who was a professor at Southern Seminary in Louisville. And Bruce was speaking at Denton Bible Church, and he began to talk about husbands and wives and their roles in the family and what they should do and what they shouldn't do. And he got off into something that really came off really negatively, and I think even kind of dangerously. And so we're going to talk about that and kind of explore maybe why he said what he said, and what he meant by it, and what impact maybe this kind of thinking has on us. So I'm going to stop this video. We'll pick it up in just a second, talking about Brother Ware.